Say it looks like a giant, like canister for a bottle of scotch or something.
Well, I'll tell you what, Chief, let's sit down.
I was wondering where to put it. To explain this, this paint actually was nicked off here in other places when we got it. It rotted around some skunk. So I've been preparing it.
Oh.
Was that from Thornwood?
No, not I got 4 boys. I go ready to like the last everything done. That's a tank gun round.
Oh, really?
They have a anti-tank variant striker. More technology. 105 millimeter rounds.
Yeah. My 8-year-old looks like it's ready to go.
And the same tank in Fortnite. It's box. And Don has a photograph of one of them fired in Yakima. The flame plume out the barrel was larger than the chip.
Really?
Pretty impressive.
Must have been zoom lens.
Yeah, but there was no vacant look in my face on this guy.
I'd like to call this meeting of Lakewood City Council for Monday, December 3rd to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Barth? Councilmember Boki? Councilmember Brandstetter?
Here.
Councilmember Moss? Here. Councilmember Simpson?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Wellen? Present. Mayor Anderson?
Here.
You have a quorum?
Thank you. Now, would you rise with me in a moment of silence in honor of our men and women serving overseas, followed by the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd now like to call on Chief Zarro to present the Chief's Commendation Award.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson and council members. Tonight is one of our awards presentations that we do periodically now, not really on a scheduled basis, but one that we started doing here at council meetings some months ago, just to share it more with you all and with the community that comes to the meetings. We have 10 presentations. I'll bring them up one at a time, just give a brief description about what the award is for, and then when it's all said and done, we'll have them all come back down for a group photo with all of you. If I could first have Ms. Carmelita Francis. Carmelita, on June 3rd, 2018, in the middle of the day, happened to see an officer that was engaged in a physical fight with somebody who's trying to take him into custody. This officer could not reach his radio because his arm International. Jeff and Nancy, while off duty, were riding a motorcycle out on the peninsula. They came across a vehicle wreck where a car actually overturned and was smoking and starting to catch fire. The family inside happened to be from France here. And Jeff and Nancy quickly rushed out and were able to get the family out of the car. And we all know that Nancy, well, so she did double duty. But this family was saved because of their efforts, and it just goes to show you never know when you might be called into duty. But when that call came, they answered. Not only did they be recognized by us with a life-saving award, they also received what it's first in my career, and that's a letter of appreciation from the French Consulate. Jeff and Nancy, for your efforts here in saving that.
I think so.
Some of you may or may not have seen this last year we started the Chief for a Day program. And
No,
Chief Maddie
our
is
president.
just a wonderful little girl about 10 years old. And one of the things we wanted to do while we're in the Chief for a Day event up at the academy, the police academy here, we decided to do this with about 2 weeks notice. Normally there's about a year of preparation put into it. One of the things that we needed desperately was just manpower and somebody to help coordinate things like that, just to make sure it went smoothly. Ellie jumped in with both feet, and it's process for us and made a wonderful day for Chief Matt. So Ellie, for your work in helping us to help Now we have, if I could have 3 officers, or 2 officers and Sergeant come up. Sergeant Jeremy Prater, Officer Ken Henson, and Officer Dan Penn. So what a lot of people don't know is we recently took on the role of, I guess, provider of the Reserve Academy, the Reserve Police Officers Academy for our part of the state. It had been done for years by the city of Pike, and they no longer were able to sustain it. It wasn't my idea. These 3 actually came to me and said they wanted to pursue this academy. They actually came up with the curriculum. They taught the classes. They devoted their own time to it, to developing this program, and actually graduated their first class of reserve officers here just a couple months ago. It's really going above and beyond to help put a program together. And what I love about programs like these is it's not me or John pushing something down to the officers and say, you need to do this. It's these 3 taking initiative, seeing something that they can do for our profession and better our region and jumping in. For their efforts in providing the Reserve Academy, Sergeant Jeremy Prater, Officer Ken Henson, Officer Dan Tenney for all Okay, for the next one, if I could have Officer Jonathan Beard, Officer Vince Savanchio, Officer Cody White, Officer Jordan Feldman, and Officer Niall Tecumari. Niall here, you might be on a call. This really is one of those, different incidents that we deal with, make the papers, and do songs. This one, one makes the news. Brianna. That table goes over here when you're done.
It's always great to celebrate the efforts of the Lakewood PD, and it's nice to join it together here tonight with citizens who chip in to make this a wonderful community. The next item we have is a business showcase, and I would invite Mr. Raul Silva, the General Manager of First Transit, to join me at the podium. For the last half dozen years or so, I've been Lakewood's representative on the board of Pierce Transit. And little did I know when I took on that role that a very important service, in fact, I think the majority of the paratransit service is actually provided by First Transit as a contractor to Pierce Transit. And they do a wonderful job providing mobility to some of our most limited citizens in the sense that they lack the ability to get around for life-sustaining type of events, like basic needs like getting to your food, going to church, or getting to the doctor, having your dialysis, and First Transit does a wonderful job of doing that. As one of the largest private sector providers of public transit management and contracting in North America, First Transit knows how to provide quality service to its clients. The company employs 19,500 people across North America, including 100 people at its Lakewood location at 2310 104th Street Court South. First Transit is a division of Scotland-based First Group, the leading transport operator in the United Kingdom and North America. Locally, First Transit operates and maintains 67 Pierce Transit shuttle buses, providing roughly 70% of that agency's shuttle service annually under a contract. The partnership dates back to the early 1990s, another century though. The focus is to provide a safe, reliable, and customer-centric experience, said First Transit General Manager Raul Silva. It's all one team. The company also gives back to the community. Each fiscal year, its employees select charitable organizations to support. In recent years, these have included drives for the Samoan Family Support Services, Mary Bridge Children's Hospital, the Wishing Well Foundation, and AMVIT's support of local veterans. Because of its commitment to provide top-quality paratransit service to the region through its partnership with Pierce Transit, and because of the dedication of its employees to give back to the community, the Lakewood City Council recognizes First Transit as its December 2018 business showcase. Mr. Silva? Get a picture and then I'll ask you off. No, here. Yeah. And would you like to say a couple words?
Thank you so much for the honor and the privilege of representing our team. It really is an honor and privilege. I've been doing this for about 25 years now, and it's serving the most vulnerable portion of our citizens, the disabled and the elderly. It's really a partnership we have with Pierce. We value this partnership, and we value the recognition in today's meeting. Thank you.
I invite you to come down and take a picture with the council. you. Like hockey, why do they play three halves? We now move to the Youth Council report. Will this week's leader please approach?
Good evening, Council. I'm Jefferson Magianis from Clover Park High School, and I'm this month's representative for Youth Council. So prior to this council meeting, we just had a presentation by Hanford McLeod Hanford McLeod from Nisqually Tribal Council about tribal history. And the 26th of next month, we will be partnering with the Lions Club for the Crab Feed fundraiser, the annual Crab Feed fundraiser. And right now, we're continuing planning for the Youth Council's Youth Summit. We were looking at Pierce College and the Boys and Girls Club as potential venues, and we're hoping to find some more venues in the future. And the next planning meeting will be next Monday. And seniors will be sending applications for the AWC scholarship around this month, maybe next week. And school reports.
Good evening, Mayor Anderson, Deputy Mayor Whalen, City Council, and citizens of Lakewood. I'm Albert James, and I'll be presenting the Lakes High School report. This past Saturday, many of our school organizations partnered with Barnes & Noble to host our annual book fair. In addition to performances and gift wrapping services from various Lakes clubs, proceeds from this past Saturday's event will go to benefit the Lakes Library. Our ASB is continuing its work in prevention of harassment, intimidation, and bullying, commonly referred to as HIB. The ASB presents an assembly to the freshman class about the dangers and tolls HIB has on students in the overall community. This year, the assembly is being presented to all grade levels in hopes to reaffirm Lakes' stance against harassment, intimidation, and bullying. Our JRTC program has been participating in local drill competitions, showcasing the battalion's proficiency in drill, physical fitness, marksmanship, and academics. The next competition they will attend will be at Clover Park High School on December 15th. And finally, in the hectic time of college applications and general post-secondary preparation, I wanted to take the opportunity to recognize Youth Council member and all-around Lake superstar Dorian Simon for signing a national letter of intent to Stanford University. We know that he will make a big difference in the world through his consistent hard work and dedication.
Good evening, I'm Susan Cosio Trujillo, and I'll be representing Clover Park High School. So this week, on Friday and Saturday, the Drama Club will be performing Aesop's Fables. And on December 15th, Clover Park High School will be hosting the drill meet, where about 8 schools will be competing in drill. This month, we are also having the We Create Change campaign, where our school raises money to send goats to families in need in third world countries. And we are also beginning planning for our MLK Day where it's a day of service, where the students go and do many acts of service for the community and the school. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Lenise Kamak, and I'm the representative for Harrison Prep. Just in this upcoming new month, we just finished our We Act campaign, We Scare Hunger, and all of our donations will be donated to Lakewood's Fish Food Bank. We have our drama club performing Alice in Wonderland this Friday and Saturday, and that's really all that's going on at Harrison Prep. There's not a lot right now. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Peyton Gomez, and I will be giving the report for Covenant High School. Last Friday, we had a holiday movie night where we watched Santa Claus with Tim Allen, and we had pizza, chips, popcorn, and other drinks. And then this Thursday, we have our open house where we will be showcasing our school to prospective students and their families. And also on Thursday and Friday, we have our annual Christmas art show and choir concert where we will showcase all the artwork of our students, and our choir will be singing a performance. And then on December 14th, we have our winter banquet, which will be held at the Point Defiance Pagoda from 6 to 8:30 p.m., and it will just be a time for the students to get together. And then our last day of school is also on December 14th, and we will be back from break on January 2nd.
This is council's opportunity to ask questions.
Any questions from council? Mr. Whalen.
Well, thanks for coming out this evening. Does the group plan to have some participation formally in the events this weekend? The Jingle Bell Dash, the tree lighting, all that sort of stuff? If not, enjoy coming. I hope to see some of you there.
We should have some people volunteering for that. I'm not sure how many, but I know some people from our promise board is working on arts or comments.
Yeah, with the Arts Commission, I think.
Yeah, Arts Commission's my
Great.
bad.
Well, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thanks for all your activities in the community, helping folks out, and we look forward to a good holiday season and see you back next year.
Thank you for your time.
So we have the Clover Park School District report on here, but I don't see anyone from the district here. So we'll pass on that and move to public comment. This is when any member of the public may speak to any issue of relevance to the city, whether or not it is on the agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. The yellow light will come on at 30 seconds. The red light will come on when your time is up. Please identify yourself by name and city of residence, such as Mary Moss, Lakewood, Washington. First person who is signed up is Mr. Dennis Haugen.
Dennis Haugen, Lakewood, Washington.
Fascinating.
You mentioned President Trump in a very excited, positive way. Tell me why.
I absolutely love this president. I think that what he did in this country was the most necessary thing by killing political correctness. We were losing this country, and everybody was too politically correct to tell us that we were losing this country. He stood up on a platform and he started telling the truth. And it was timely, because when you look at what's happening in Europe, I think that we would have suffered some of the same consequences that they're suffering if we hadn't had someone who's tough and willing to take the hits from the media.
In this respect, it's about immigration.
I'm talking about immigration and other things too. Standing on a platform and saying to Black America, what do you have to lose? Having everyone in the media interpret that as racism, when in fact what's actually been happening to the Black community is racist. The Democrat policies that have been inflicted in the Black community are racist. When you talk about the welfare system, Lyndon B. Johnson and the proliferation of the welfare state and his Great Society Act, right? Those are things that were racist. Trump was actually telling us, you guys are losing. So his courage and his strength is what I admire, and the results that he's already brought to this country in the 18 months that he's been in office.
So recent poll where his popularity in the black community, non-advisors, is like 36%. That's higher than any modern Republican president that I'm aware of.
You're getting me excited right now. I'm going to do a backflip. So yes, that is exactly correct. And despite, the word here is despite every single day, we have CNN, MSNBC, racist, trying to get black people in line. And here's the thing, results. These are producing results.
I literally, let me ask you. Results. I literally can't think of any single results. Not we continue to find racist. And I think in part it's the dragging out of strong popularity.
Next person who is signed up to speak is Daniel Bennett.
So, as you probably recognize me, I'm one of the residents at Merrill Creek Apartments that's been having continued issues with them. I have been following what the city has been asking of me, which was providing a letter to Merrill Creek Apartments. As per RCW 59.18.115, they had and also with the handout that the city even provides, they had 10 days to respond to my letter. The letter that I am providing a copy of, and there's also an attachment on one of those that has the original letter that I sent, but I also handed it to you guys last meeting. This letter is dated November 30th of 2018. Even as of this date today, I think it's the 2nd of December, they still have not responded to any of my requests for action. A copy of this email right here should just go, and I can pass this around. It is dated November 1st, and they were claiming that the fixes for the apartment would happen by the 23rd of November. As it stands right now, literally nothing has happened, at least at my apartment, nor very little has happened in the surrounding apartments. So the issues are long withstanding, and at this point, I don't quite know what to do. I mean, I was told by via Facebook, via Bryn, the communication manager, that I should probably seek out an attorney. But I'm trying to go through the ways that the city says we can go through, via what the RCWs state, via what the handouts state. So at this point, I'm just hoping that the city can help us. In fact, I'm not the only resident here today from Merrill Creek Apartments that has had significant issues. So I would, for the record, like to thank Pierce County Sheriff's Department. Apparently, they just put out a poster that they nabbed someone who had been prowling, and I actually recognized the vehicle of who they apprehended, and it seems like the three individuals had a girlfriend or fiance or something like that, and we believe it was one of the residents at Merrill Creek Apartments. Anyhow, I thank you for your time. I have made sure to place my personal information on that. If you could reach out to me, I would highly appreciate it, because at this point, as a full-time college student using my VA benefits, I don't have very much money to afford something like a lawyer, and I'm just hoping that the city could help us out. And I thank you for your time.
Next person who signed up, I apologize, I can't make out the line. It's Jose Antonio Cavuente. Apologize.
Hello, my name is Jose Antonio Guillermin. I've been a lifelong resident of Lakewood. I've never really had any major complaints up until I moved into Merrill Creek. Now, I've tried to be within reason, listen, try to work with them. I've had many repairs that I've asked for order works and such be ignored. I still have problems with the apartments. With the repairs that have just happened, I've had members of their subcontracting walked directly into my apartment. How? I don't know. The door was locked. I'm in the shower. Having repairs such as a toilet leak, which is an easy repair, constantly be ignored. Upstairs neighbors using air conditioning, which isn't approved by the apartment, still leak through the floors and then put holes in my upper ceilings that I have to wait months to get repaired. Now I'm facing issues where, because of their lack of, I guess, clerical issues, they didn't update my actual renewal of my lease, and they let me know this month that I had to pay an extra $400 because of their error. Now, I paid my rent. I'm just highly upset at the simple fact that I'm just now finding out that the city had, well, I guess plenty of time to know something and do something, but I'm still being bullied by this particular apartments because all they throw in my face constantly is that I'm in a legal binding contract, and I'm believing that puts them in that same category, but yet they're still held irresponsible and really with no intention of being serviced. It feels that way. Now, quite honestly, I've had nothing but faith, so I've never really stepped forward. I've loved my police department because I've always seen them help. All I'm asking now is for the city just to reach out and find something more, because this is ridiculous, where even I see service members getting their cars broken into because of a failed security system that they say they have, but only show up when the police show up. And it's only because our service members are so stressed out that they argue amongst each other, which is usually an easy resolve, but no. Other things happen that really piss them off. Yeah, I'd be mad if my greens were missing, my boots, my stuff were all disappearing because of lack of security, lack of repairs, people breaking into other people's apartments because the locks aren't working properly. All I'm asking members is just to reach out a little bit further and find out what we can do, because we are being harassed one way and we are being bullied another. Thank you for your time.
That's all the people who signed up to speak at public comment, but if anyone else wishes to speak, please approach the podium. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at public comment? Please identify yourself.
Yes, sir. My name is Nick Taylor with the IRIS Group. I'm a civil engineer representing a group of folks who have submitted an application for comprehensive plan and zoning amendment. Thank you. In short, the subject property is the property at the Berkeley Interchange, also known as, and pardon me, I'm making sure I have the right, as private CPA 1. In my understanding and reading the council agenda, it states, and excuse me if I pronounce anything incorrectly, Council Member Brandstetter commented that private CPA 1 was not ready for consideration. Related I-5 improvements, including a new Berkeley interchange, which would run through some of the properties identified in CPA 1, had not been initiated. Mr. Brandstetter desired initial analysis. There did not seem to be any objection from the majority of the City Council for moving this amendment. In respect to that, I'd like to say to Councilmember Brandstetter that in that consideration, I have discussion with the DOT and specifically 3 folks, and the timing of the Berkeley Interchange project. If I may read an email from, I'm not going to say any names, but there are 3 DOT folks who've given me this information very helpfully. It says, "Good morning, Nick. I'm responding on behalf of Chuck. Regarding your recent inquiry about the Berkeley Interchange. I've attached several relevant sheets from the design builder's PFA document, which reflect the plans at the Berkeley Interchange. We will start construction at Berkeley this fall and currently plan to have the interchange open to traffic in late 2019. All the right-of-way for the planned improvements has already been acquired. Please feel free to contact me if you have any other questions about the project." In discussion further today with those other 3 folks, and also with Ms. Tiffany Spear, who's been very helpful throughout the process. I understand that I also want to take the opportunity to apologize to my client and the IRIS Group, my company, as a whole. I failed to identify and include some information which I just read off in my application, or in our client's application, that I wrote on their behalf. And when I speak of my client, I mean a group of folks that went together to try and do a rezone in the area. They have the opportunity to instead of trying to purchase the property around them for a lower value, before letting the neighbors know about the rezone, they instead went and talked to the neighbors to find out about it, and they hired me to do that. And I advised them based on this knowledge to move forward with the amendment, and I failed in doing that. So I apologize for that. Nick Taylor with the Iris Group, Civil Engineering. Thank you.
Are you out? You can continue. We have a rule that allows extra time if you're representing a group, and that appears to be the case.
Sir,
but please speak more slowly so I can keep up with you.
Yes, sir. My apologies. I timed that since yesterday when I found out for 3 minutes, so I don't have. If you have any questions, if I can answer them.
We generally don't have an interrogatory.
Okay, I'm not certain of the.
Okay.
Yeah. So in short, in short, my understanding, and from reading through the Growth Management Act, and I'm going to take the time to speak on my client's behalf of the application because I do have the time. My understanding of the Growth Management Act is that that jurisdictions are required and assisted by the state in implementing comprehensive rules that help echo standards and common things that, for me, echo through municipal code and design and engineering standards and whatnot. And I understand those things. And so in reviewing this, I asked for some assistance from a land use attorney who advised that the best thing to do is to look at the law and find out what those things are. So I came up here and I've been to a couple of these and then some of the planning commission meetings, and the discussion that was given to me in those meetings and from watching another group of citizens apply for a rezone, it kind of led to knowing that that if something needed to happen, then it was the body's requirement to make something happen, basically, is what I read. And my understanding is that the amendment is up every 3 years. The cycle is up every 3 years. So at this point, what it's coming down to, in my understanding of this and the logic that I have, and I'm not very good at speaking, but if the logic that I have is that the decision is being made to not proceed with the comprehensive plan and rezone amendment strictly because the interchange has not been initiated. And so in doing so, and I should have given this earlier, I brought pictures of the initiation, and I'm not certain what the terminology of initiation is. I've done most of my work in the private and government, federal government side, but not necessarily the state and DOT side. So I reached out to the folks to find out what initiation meant, and there's varied understanding that, and not to point any fingers at anybody at all, and that's how it kind of came across when I practiced it, but the DOT folks, they've been very, very helpful. But I spoke to them today and asked if they could come today, and they said they'd already made contact, and I don't know if it was with Miss Spear, but she was the one who advised me to come up and actually talk today because I have the opportunity to do that in support of a group of owners and residents, and that's what I'm doing today, and I appreciate you guys' time. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at public comment? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at public comment? Seeing none, I declare public comment closed. Yes.
I'd like to make a request while the two individuals are here from Merrill Creek. This is something that we've been involved in for some time. It came up 6 months ago. And so that they can get out of here, can we get an update from staff, if it's possible right now, on the situation at Merrill Creek? Because this is a situation where we need to be considering.
Yeah, I think probably be
rather than wait till late.
Well, we can have them meet with Mr. Buer, and he can tell them what the status is. There has been activity there.
I could tell you that Merrill Gardens is one of 12 or 13 multifamily complexes representing over 1,000 units that is currently being looked at as part of our rental housing safety program, including some of the items that the two gentlemen mentioned here this evening. So we are going through, our due diligence and our process commensurate with what our code is on that.
However, I wouldn't say the majority, but a significant aspect of tenant complaints there is a lack of security, which isn't part of the building code. So, but if maybe Mrs. Spear can direct you to Mr. Buer back here for you Merrill Creek folks, and he can tell you where the status of the code enforcement efforts. Yeah. So we now move to the consent agenda, Madam Clerk.
A, approval of the minutes of the City Council study session of November 13th, 2018. B, approval of the minutes of the City Council special meeting of November 15th, 2018. C, approval of the minutes of the City Council meeting of November 19th, 2018. D, approval of payroll checks in the amount of $2,421,570.39 for the period of October 16th, 2018 through November 15th, 2018. E, approval of claim vouchers in the amount of $3,447,055.58 for the period of October 16th, 2018 through November 15th, 2018. F, motion number 2018-80, reappointing Don Daniels, James Guerrero, John Paul Wigman, and appointing Ryan Pearson to serve on the Planning Commission through December 15th, 2023. G, motion number 2018-81, reappointing Lori Moss, Edith Owen Wallace, and appointing Sarah Yamamoto to serve on the Community Services Advisory Board through December 15th, 2022. H, motion number 2018-82, reappointing Glenn Spieth and appointing William Elder to serve on the Landmarks and Heritage Advisory Board through December 31st, 2021. I, motion number 2018-83, approving the 2018 accounts receivable write-offs in the amount of $4,074.67. J, motion number 2018-84, authorizing the execution of an amendment to the agreement with Miles Resources, LLC, increasing project construction spending authorization to the amount of $2,361,244.05 for the construction of Silicon Boulevard safety improvements. K, motion number 2018-85, authorizing the execution of an amendment to the agreement with R.W. Scott Construction, increasing the project construction spending authorization to the amount of $578,897.55 for the Military Road Southwest and 112th Street Southwest intersection improvement project. L, motion number 2018-86, authorizing the execution of a professional services agreement with Horwath Law, PLLC, for public defender services from February 1, 2019 to December 31, 2020. M, items filed in the Office of the City Clerk. 1, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting minutes of October 30th, 2018.
Thank you. Is there any item which any member of the council wishes to have removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
It's been moved by Mr. Simpson, seconded by Ms. Moss, that we adopt the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Wayland.
Well, I just want to say that we go through the consent agenda pretty readily on the various appointments to the citizen advisory boards, and I know we've all read the application packets. I support, obviously, the nomination for the reappointment and the appointments. I just want to say it was a great packet. There were a lot of people who applied for positions that are incredibly well qualified, a lot of new people that have, military veterans, folks with advanced degrees, fresh faces that want to be engaged in the community. I just found that to be fantastic. So I would hope that we send those who don't get appointed tonight, I hope we send a little follow-up letter to say thank you so much for your interest and please stay engaged, because some of them could be fantastic citizen volunteers.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We now move to resolutions. Resolution number 2018-20. Madam Clerk.
Resolution number 2018-20, establishing the 2019 Comprehensive Plan, Land Use Zoning Map, and Policy Amendments.
Mr. Buer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Growth Management Act, Chapter 3670A, RCW, allows amendments to comprehensive plans no more than once per year. There are some cities and counties that allow amendments in a much longer stretch. I believe Pierce County is 2 years. The city of Lakewood has an amendment process that accepts amendments once a year. The City Council this evening is considering a resolution that would establish a 2019 list of comprehensive plan and related land use and development code amendments. This is referred to as the 2019 CPA docket. We request that the City Council turn to your council packet to page 147. On page 147 is the first page of Resolution 2018-20. The resolution lists a variety of amendments. There are 3 types of amendments in the resolution. There is a list of privately initiated amendments, 4 in total, all map amendments, one of which is referred to as the Moss Amendment, where you've heard testimony under public comment this evening. There are also 7 city staff initiated amendments. These are a combination of map and text amendments. Some of those are pretty much household items or housekeeping items. Others are somewhat more substantial, includes an update to the economic development element. The third category is city council initiated amendments, and here there are 4. One of the map amendments would drop from consideration this year, the mass proposal. The other map amendment would change land use designations in a portion of Springbrook to industrial. The third amendment is a text amendment and would increase the open space requirement for multifamily development. And the other text amendment would increase density in the R2 zone to 4 dwelling units per acre. Requested action this evening is the council adopt a docket for 2019, and I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Mr. Whalen. Mr. Bueller, in light of that public comment we heard tonight on private CPA 1, my question to you is, if I can get the microphone to work, what's the downside, if any, from maintaining this on the docket for review and consideration? Because, as I understand it, the proposed rezone from 8 parcels as single family, which is not well developed as single family, to NBD zoning or NC2 zoning, frankly represents a change in the right direction given what's going on in that intersection at some point by WashDOT. So what's the downside to doing that now?
The downside is that the staff at least would like to take a look at the 2 interchanges at once, both the one at Berkeley as well as the one at Thorn Lane. There may be also a need or a desire to change more zoning and land use designations at this location other than those that are listed on this proposal. And I don't know what that looks like yet. We could go through a map amendment process and there could be other parcels added, but right now that is not a part of the docket. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like. However, if the council wants to move forward with this, we can certainly, place it on the agenda. It's not that crucial one way or the other. It's just another amendment for staff to process.
Following up on that, aside from the convenience of processing it with something that's adjoining or in the same area, is there any practical impact on the use and development that's negative as opposed to positive? And my prejudice in this has long been that, Tillicum, if you look back 10 years, would be one of the most desirable, developable parcels of property in the state if it had nothing on it. But the problem is that it needs to be redeveloped and it's hodgepodge. It seems like there's an assembly here of property in an area that we want to have redeveloped that's so close to freeway and railroad tracks and traffic that it's undesirable as residential property. Part of it's undeveloped at this point. and that we, by denying the request, we may be pushing the potential for redevelopment into the future and doing exactly what, from an economic development standpoint, we attempt to avoid, which is that being an impediment to redevelopment as opposed to a facilitator.
I'm not opposed to putting it on the agenda. We'll do the analysis. The analysis will speak for itself, and then you'll have the opportunity to take action in May, June of this year.
That at least gives us a chance to look at it.
Yes. Again, we were responding to some of the initial comments from council at the time.
I'm reluctant to do anything at this point which would preclude favorable action in this cycle. So, Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a slightly different view of that. I think that there is the development of the two new intersections in Tillicum create a great deal of opportunity for that neighborhood to be developed, to be able to go and do that. It's obviously going to change traffic patterns and behavior and the potential of that. But I think that we need to get that down and done, and then we need to look at how much commercial area does Tillicum need as opposed to what does it need for other types of uses, okay? And deal with that in a future cycle where we can look at the entire impact on that neighborhood as opposed to do one piece and then do one piece and do another piece. We have irons in the fire in Tillicum that we hope will come to fruition. They include the interchanges, but they include, and what is that going to do? It includes, are we going to get a station study for Amtrak and the Sounder extension? And so I think that to start now to begin to piecemeal select the eventual entire business and commercial zoning plan for Tillicum is premature, in that in a future cycle where we'll really be able to know how traffic patterns have evolved, how things are doing that, is a more proposed time for the city to move forward with looking at a range and say to what extent is Berkeley going to join Union as a primary business corridor, and other things. And I'd would rather not do something that then is now a building block that people have relied upon, and then in the end we decide, no, maybe it should look a little bit different. So while I don't necessarily feel that this is something that would never be appropriate, I think the process is more appropriate to look at the entire neighborhood with a city-initiated thing to do that. And it's consistent with a refreshing of the Tillicum neighborhood plan that we haven't refreshed in over a decade.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to ask about the Bridgeport Way Meadow Park Road, the CPA ZOA number 2. And we had some discussion at a study session last week. The existing zoning is I2, existing future land use I, and the request by the owner is C2, CC. But across the street is something else. I think the the conversation seemed to move towards it was CC or C2 probably isn't the proper zoning. But the same request wasn't made. This staff is okay with going forward with this one. So what is our expectation here that we think that it is something that needs to be rezoned because it's really not industrial there if the guy doesn't want to use it for what it's being used for now. But are we just expecting the Planning Commission will fix it?
What I expect to happen, this is their application. So this is their proposed zoning and land use designation. I will tell you now, this will not be staff's recommendation to the Planning Commission nor City Council. But this is their proposal, so I'm making sure that you see it. You're going to probably see a different commercial designation, and you'll have the opportunity to decide which one is the most appropriate.
Thank you.
That is which number?
That would be on page 154. This is CPA Zoning Ordinance Amendment 2019-2.
Mr. Whalen.
I just have a further comment to maybe get some council consensus on going back to the first one. I completely understand where Mr. Brandstetter is coming from, and I'm intrigued by the thought of this perhaps being a little bit of a catalyst. Yeah, we incur some staff time and expense on this, but it might prompt a wider discussion about relooking at the Tillicum plan. You know, when we allow the staff to review this at the Planning Advisory Board, it doesn't mean we're going to rubber stamp approval by any means, but at least it allows the topic and the discussion to go forward at this time with what we know. And it may not be timely, but I'm okay with letting it go forward just because it might prompt us to have a further discussion now. And maybe we say no to this one down the road because of any good number of reasons that we have the PAB and or staff come back to us and tell us why it's premature. But I think it's an okay discussion to have from my standpoint. But I agree with your point, so, yeah. So again, I'm throwing it out there to help the mayor cull some consensus on that.
Well, here's...
Right. Well, right now it's to remove.
So currently, we have an illustration that says remove, and we have a resolution that recites it. The way I read it.
Would the mayor like some assistance?
Pardon?
Would the mayor like some assistance?
Yes.
What you'd want to do is strike removing the following application from the comprehensive plan amendment docket on page 149, and then moving that particular amendment down to the category adding or allowing, excuse me, You would, all you need to do is remove that section, removing, and then that mass piece, and then amend the map on page 153 to say, to remove the word remove.
You want me to make the motion?
Because the mass amendment is already listed on the very beginning on page 147 as a privately initiated application.
I think it's still it lacks some clarity. So there's a resolution, then it says the city council amends. What was it, 149? Says, whereas Lakewood City Council proposes the following amendments, removing. Amendments to what? Because we haven't done anything.
That would be just removing the mass, what I'm calling the mass amendment. This is just a docket, Mr. Mayor. You're not approving any applications, and that says that a little bit further in the resolution.
Yeah, but we haven't. We haven't acted.
No.
There isn't a motion or a resolution before us to amend.
That's correct.
So that's why I'm confused on and maybe our parliamentarian could help me out here, is it says, I understand the intent. I'm just.
Just get rid of the word removing on page 49.
Yeah. Proposes the following amendments. We're amending the comprehensive plan. We're advancing a docket for an amendment on the comprehensive.
Yes.
We have a resolution to advance. This purports to be an amendment to the resolution incorporated in the resolution itself, instead of a redraft of the resolution. Yeah. And that's why, just from a parliamentary standpoint, I can't get
amendments for consideration.
how you can have an amendment within a resolution without having the resolution come first.
It's not clear what yes vote means.
Yeah, I want to make sure we're all voting on the same thing.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I agree with what the mayor is saying, and what I would tell you is, provided we can get to a place of understanding, common understanding between these 7 people who are going to vote, then we're going to call that okay, as long as everyone has the same understanding and you're voting on the same thing. I would waive any highly detailed knowledge of parliamentary regulation of it, but you definitely want to make sure that you all have the same understanding of what you're voting on.
I want to make sure everybody's voting on the same thing.
Yes.
So my understanding would be that if you approve the action without an amendment, that then the CPA 1 would remain on the docket of items that we're moving forward.
If we strike the amending language at 149. So we don't have a pending motion, right?
We do.
We do? Okay, so you want to amend it out?
Sure. I'll clarify. I will make a motion to amend the proposed resolution 2018-20 to strike language on page 149 under the whereas, the word removing, referencing the CPA ZOA 2019-01 map amendment, MOS. So in other words, it'll then read, the Lakewood City Council proposes the following amendments for consideration, and it would not include that as a removed amendment for consideration. I would also then move to change the map on page 153 to remove the word remove.
Yes.
Is that a motion?
Is there a second to the motion to amend?
I have
Don't ask me to repeat it.
you will now have amendment 2019-01 in there twice, because it's on page 147, and it's also on page 149. So
it's 140.
Suggestion would be to remove, I would go on page 149 and delete the word removing until the word, actually until the number 192, period.
So
I would take
there
the
was
whole
not a
thing.
second to Mr. Whalen's amendment.
That was my motion.
So we now go to Mr. Bulkey's amendment.
No, I'm just suggesting that to Mr. Whalen, that Councilmember Whalen.
accept the
Deputy Mayor.
clarification for my motion to amend this resolution with the language suggested by Mr. Boki, plus the removal of the word remove on the diagram on page 153.
There you go.
So been a motion to amend and second by Mr. Whalen, seconded by Ms. Barth. Is there a discussion on the motion? And Mike, just to restate, the clarification is on the amendment is to remove the removal, removing the removal of map amendment 2019-01 and essentially reinstating the map itself at 153 by removing the word remove.
Exactly.
So, any further discussion on the amendment? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We now move to resolution number 2018-20 as amended. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Your comments a few moments ago echoed what I was thinking, that we wanted to have 7 people moving in the same direction on this. And I take Deputy Mayor Whalen's point. I thought his, in a sense, splitting the hairs there was well taken. And given that there seems to be, to me, a degree of, shall we say, comprehension or lack thereof about this, because I will admit that I'm not following this as clearly as I would like, I would like that we defer on this motion until we are all very clear in the direction we are moving.
I note that this is, my understanding is this advances it. This is not taking any approval action, and that we get another bite at the apple.
All right, all right.
Is that correct, Mr. Bjork? 2 thumbs up.
But, okay, I'm sorry, Mayor.
This allows this private amendment to move forward, which is what I heard from the consensus of the council.
May I ask a question?
But it's not a final.
Okay.
But it doesn't
May I
mean
ask a
that you're approving it
Okay.
or anything
All
of
right.
that nature. That's going to be another day.
Okay, that I understand. But if we do not, let me say, put it this way, if we do, as the mayor has just indicated, are we, I realize we're not committing ourselves, but can we save ourselves? I'm not trying to save ourselves work necessarily, but do we advance that issue by moving forward tonight? What is the, I guess what I'm trying to say is, what is the fallout? What is the negatives to if we don't?
It's just,
Is it neither one way or the other?
well, Mr. Branstad explained it fairly well. You're looking at one specific little part of Tillicum.
Right.
In the bigger issue is, should the city council be looking at all the commercial areas in Tillicum, and is now the opportunity to talk about that or later? What I heard from the city council is you're advancing this amendment, and that discussion of the future commercial nature of Tillicum will be coming back to you probably as a part of this amendment. And then you'll have to look at that issue back in sometime in May or June.
Thank you.
I think will be a good thing. Any further discussion? Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think we've moved past the idle of the issue of CPA 1-19, but I would like to move on to the text amendment, which is number 14, which is actually the one that relates to the R2 zoning district throughout the city. And changing, keeping the R2 designation everywhere when it's R2, but changing the density that R2 means, which is rather significantly. And it is when I look at the table on pages 141, and I look at table 3 and compare it to table 2 as to how that change would move on, the proposed text amendment proposes still describing R2 as residential estates, but moving it so close to R3, and the purpose is it affects significant acreage of the city. You know, we have had situations, and then what the table doesn't show is when you then add our PDD regulations that it further increase density, you would essentially allow the existing R2 residential estates properties to be developed at a density that is actually the equivalent to or even slightly greater than R3 without a PDD. You know, I think this takes this totally out. We're taking R2 totally out of the realm of what is intended to be residential estates and moving it into the same zonings we have with R3, R4. And I don't think that this amendment, as it's considered, it does that transparently, and I also don't think that it's going on off. And so I had a couple of questions for Mr. Buer. This becomes an area-wide amendment that in the past, the city has said, and it doesn't really require specific property owner notifications. It just is an area citywide action to do that, and so it wouldn't be a case that every R2 property owner would get a notice that we are doing this to their property and their neighborhood, and that we would, and I guess I'm not really clear, while I consider it's a considerable amount of acreage, I'm not really concerned about what acreage this would be, and how would this affect existing PDDs in R2 zones, but that haven't yet begun, been completed, and to move on down. I think we went through a situation with the property on the corner of Veterans and Gravelly Lake about should it go to R3, should it go to R2. We went to R2, so instead of being 2.0, a PDD was going to allow it to become 2.7, if my number is correct, dwellings per acre. Now, if we were to change it, it's already R2, we make it 4, and then it could become, 4.8 or under a PDD, and drastically change what citizens think we did with that. I think if we want to consider the Gross Management Act movement to urban densities, then we have to consider, do we even want to have an urban estates piece over there? We shouldn't say we have it so that the people who live there feel comfortable, but change the number so that it is essentially the urban residential piece to do that. I think that before we as a council, because this isn't a citizen-initiated amendment, that before we as a council put this on a docket for a comprehensive plan change, we maybe need to figure out exactly how we're going to reach out and what exactly do we want to do, as opposed to, I think we're just throwing 4.0 as a number out there and it's saying, here's a way to increase density in 10 to 15% of the city. So I guess I would move to remove text amendment 14 from this year's docket, because I think it is better for us to consider that in a different way than is moving directly ahead as do that. And so, so I move to delete the text attendant that is 14-2019 within this resolution.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Okay, now further discussion. Mr. Bolke.
Well, I asked for this amendment, and a couple of things. The Growth Management Hearings Board, which we don't control, has said clearly that urban is 4 units per acre. So I have never understood the R2 zoning. The R2 zoning is not residential. The average house on an R2 zoned home that I can see is somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 to 1,500 square feet. There are small houses on big lots. And then the idea behind the whole residential estate zoning, the R1 mainly, was that it was on lakes, and so we were protecting water quality in some form. The R2 zoning doesn't have any such justification to it. I feel like a council decided on R2 zoning because there were either neighbors or there were council members who lived in these areas and just didn't want density. So the impact of not, first of all, I think we're in violation of the Growth Management Act, so I think we would lose. I mean, I may get, there's lawyers here, but I think we would lose when challenged on that. 2, because it doesn't meet the density requirements and we have no justification of why we do 2.2 to an acre. Secondly, this goes back again to this eternal debate we have in the city of why we have such high density areas with tons of apartments. And part of the reason is, and a good portion of the reason is because so much of the property is locked up in very low density, rural densities. You know, hundreds of acres of our city is locked up into rural densities, and none of them are farms. And so that's why I did that, rather than go piece by piece and have owners or heirs to the owner's properties say, I want to make it R3 because I want to put houses on it, and fight these battles every single time because the neighbors next door want it, they still think they live out in the country. We just changed the zoning to something that's legal, that meets the requirements of the Growth Management Act as told to us by the Growth Management Hearings Board. So that's why I presented it.
Mr. Buer, could you explain the impact of a PDD on the proposed R2 at 4 units an acre?
Well, currently under the PDD zone, you're allowed to reduce your density, and that has resulted in people proposing 10,000 square foot lots in the R1 and R2 zoning district. So if you were to reduce the size of the minimum lot size down, you are going to find yourself in a situation where you're going to have some very small lots in a PDD zone for an area that's zoned R2. There's some other issues, if I may, Mr. Mayor, just to give you the extent of the project size. R2 zoning covers 593 gross acres of the city, and there were 614 single-family residences within those areas. Now, most of those areas are not going to see the increase in density because some of those properties are adjacent to lakes and Clover Creek. And so the likelihood of seeing the increase in density is not possible. As to how this was created, the R1 and R2 zone, the way in which that was done, and this was many years ago, was the city council at the time asked city staff to take a look at the sizes of the largest state residential zones, and there appeared to be a break. The larger zones, or larger pieces of property were zoned R1, and those that fell within the area of around 17,000, 18,000 square feet, as I recall, that's how the R2 zoning district was established. I'm doing that from memory, but that's how that information came about. Now, if you do move forward with this application, you'll get all this information as a part of the analysis, and then you'll make a determination whether or not to do it. But this was Council Member Boke's request, and staff is honoring it. But Mr. Bradstetter is correct. If you apply the PDD district to the R2 zone with this change, it's a substantial reduction in lot size.
Is there, just not proposing but asking, is there a way to limit the PDD's application to R2 zoning if the lot size was reduced?
Off the top of my head, yes, there is a way, and but I'm doing it off the cuff, and I feel uncomfortable doing that.
So I was asking an off-the-cuff question, so I'll take an off-the-cuff answer.
I would imagine that when we come back with this amendment, if this is something that you want to do, we will bring back the PDD discussion as a part of it.
Mr. Whalen.
Well, I appreciate the discussion on this point. I might have been asleep at the switch when this was brought up as a proposed amendment last week. It's not a bad one for the reasons Mr. Boke states. I just don't know if I'm ready to jump into it, or whether it makes good sense for staff to jump into it yet without understanding the premise. So is the premise correct that the current R2 designation that you have in your table 2 at 17,000 gross square feet is in violation of the GMA because of the urban versus suburban designations?
There was a Growth Management Act decision rendered that basically described minimum density at 4 units per acre. But there are cities that have larger estate zoning still in place, right, unless it's challenged.
It could be, but we haven't seen that yet, principally because the way we're configured with 590 plus acres with 600 plus homes in those 590 acres, there's not likely to be a change because of the way they're configured around the city, topographically or otherwise.
I can certainly make an argument for a variety of reasons why a lower density is necessary and why the R1 and R2 zones should stay the same. Yes.
My only thought, and again, I appreciate the thought about a text amendment change to affect density for any number of good reasons, but I think there's some valid reasons not to in Lakewood. My concern is, given what we've done in the sub-area plan, where we're promoting density, certainly in the urban core, whether we need to consider a change to the R2 via a text amendment, or whether this is something we might want to consider down the road after we kind of see what happens in the town center.
Well, the buildable lands report is coming back here very soon, which is going to be looking at density in the city of Lakewood and throughout all other Pierce County cities. And that's something that's scheduled between now and June. You're going to be seeing that report, and that will give you a better indication that you may want to do something or not do something. And, you know, so that might be something for consideration in 2020. I'm not trying to talk away Mr. Boke's amendment.
No, I'm not either. I think it's a good conversation piece to have, and I appreciate having it, as I did for the first map amendment, or the text, whatever it was, the CPA 01. So, you know, again, if it stimulates good conversation in light of the buildable lands report coming out, I wouldn't have a big problem with it, but I am not inclined to be voting on it when it comes down the road without a lot more information for me. But I know we're not at that point yet.
So we're back to square one.
Yeah,
We're back to square one. That's what I was arguing about earlier. There is not a clarity here that I'm comfortable with on this. And speaking for myself, I mean, I've heard good points from every one of you tonight. There is nothing, Jason is absolutely right. There is a discussion to be had here. It hasn't been had. And Mr. Buer, I know how hard you work, and you're clear in your explanation. So why the heck don't I have that sense of comfort on this? And that's where I'm with the deputy mayor. I'm not willing to vote to say, yeah, let's go ahead and do this.
Well, I'm not willing to vote to say, let's go ahead and do this, but I'm not willing to vote to kill it at this point, which is what happens if we don't take action. And I am concerned about the minimum density in an urban area and the Growth Management Act, as much as I despise many portions of that. I think that cutting down the size of R2 has this salutary effect of helping preserve our R1, which to a great extent creates a character in the city of Lakewood that we wish to preserve, the large estate lots with trees. And if we're forced to bring those lots down too through some adverse growth management act action, I think the result wouldn't be good. I also am reminded that we have a goal of promoting owner-occupied housing, and in redevelopment, there are limited opportunities to do that, and it's not going to be in apartments shoved in the core of the city as much as it's going to be in 1,200 square foot houses on an acre and a half coming down and having 4 houses come up. And
certainly doesn't mean at the end of the day that we would, after this gestate, say 4 is the number. It might be 3 or something.
And it might not be, it might not be 9,300 square feet. It might be 12,000. I think we need more information to make the decision, and killing it is premature. So that's a very big lot now. It's in today's, that's 2 lots in today's parlance. I mean, what?
It's an estate.
Yeah, it's an estate lot. Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In this particular text amendment, I am not totally in agreement with the thought of leave it on and then we'll distill all this later. What leaving it on does, it requires getting a SEPA done, requires 2 public hearings, one by the Planning Commission, one by us, and that for a proposal that I don't think we're ready to really go to the community and say, we as a council, because this would be on here but saying the council proposes this. It's not that we're leaving on as the one in Tillicum where a citizen paid some money to have a proposal considered. This is one where we're saying we're putting this proposal on the table. And I don't think we should do that if we're as uncertain about really what the impact of what we're proposing is going to be and aren't ready to articulate that. Leaving it on results in a lot of work. It definitely will, and that's a good thing, result in a lot of input back to us from the community, but I think that I would much say that we're not ready yet to say that we as a council have a good idea as to why we're doing it. The GMA has a goal of 4, the density of 4 in urban areas. Generally, most cities have been applying that as figure out all the math and come out to make sure that you're averaging out that way. Certainly, if that's our logic, that every place should be at least 4, then we should be then we would be, by that logic, we'd be having R1 included in this same thought. Additionally, this is a year, unlike the past 6 years, where there really is some likelihood that the legislature is going to take a look at the Growth Management Act. You know, the Ruckle House study is being done, is being given to the legislature. They've kicked this can down the road to have it studied and studied and studied, for the past 5 years. this looks like a year when there may be some real looks to say what kind of changes need to be made in the Growth Management Act. And so I don't know whether this is a number that would get into that consideration, because I don't know how that's going to play out, other than that it is going to be a legislative topic this year. And it's for that reason I think that we're not ready to consider as significant a text change, even though it's only a couple of lines in a table, this year.
Mr. Bulkey.
So I would just remind the council that this council has stated a number of times it is in support of additional single-family residential housing in this city. And I'm not sure where that's going to come from, because there's a lot of lots that in the R3 and R4 areas that are already fully developed. We see a number of, where we see a few anyway, of short plats and whatnot, but we're on record supporting single-family residential development. But if we don't unlock any property to do single-family residential development, it's a great line, but it's not backed by anything. And I think Mr. Buer's numbers, 593 acres, 614 single-family residences, barely 1 per acre. That's not even 1.1 per acre. So even in the R2 zone, it's zoned. It's actually we have less density than we would in an R1 zone if it was zoned R1. So I would just point that out.
Okay, so the vote is going to be on the amendment to remove the text amendment 2019-14. Would all in favor of the amendment to remove, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. Nay. Nays have it. We now move to the motion as amended by the First Amendment. Is there any further discussion? Well, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Buer. Now you've got a lot more work to do.
Yeah.
So you get homework. We'll move to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business to come before the council?
There is none, Mayor.
New business. I entertain a motion to cancel the meetings on December 17th and December 24th.
So moved, Mr. Mayor. My wife said too.
It's been moved by Mr. Simpson. Do we have a second? It's been moved by Mr. Simpson and seconded by Ms. Moss that we cancel the meeting scheduled for December 17th and December 24th. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Canceling Christmas.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Reports by the city manager, Mr. Caulfield.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. Got 2 reports that I would like to share with you tonight. The first is a service club signs update, and I'd like to call up Mary Dodsworth, our Parks and Recreation Director, to give you an update on that, including recommended next steps. And then after that, I'd like to call up Tiffany Spear, our Planning Manager, and Dave Buer to provide the council an update on a memorandum agreement with Pierce County regarding the annexation of what was previously known as McCord Airfield, Air Force Base, and Fort Lewis, and now JBLM in Camp Murray. So with that, Ms. Dodsworth.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, City Council. I'm happy to give you a quick update regarding the work of the Park Board on the Service Club update, or the Service Club signs update. So just to start off with, in 2014, 2015, we started looking closely at our gateways. Part of it was the conversation that the U.S. Open was coming. Let's take a look at how we're going to welcome people to our community. And the conversation expanded as to all of the various ways of entering the city and what they look like and how we're presenting ourselves as a community. And so Here's just a couple examples of what our gateways kind of were looking like at that time, and we talked about how we could change those. And based on other work that the City Council supported over the last few years, we've made significant improvements in how we're welcoming people to our community, as well as just thinking about first impressions in everything that we do. So when we started having the conversation, we again had many conversations regarding first impressions, and street signs came up. Several things were happening. I would start singing to you, but it's a little late in the day. But street signs are everywhere. We have well over 7,000 city street signs, plus we have many private signs as well throughout the community, and we manage these signs. So lots of things are happening with the signs. And when we talk about really signs and why they don't work, first of all, there's over 7,000 plus a lot of private ones. But most of the time, they can be hard to read. Sometimes the messaging is poor. It's telling you one thing and giving you the information to do something else. It might be the wrong size. It might be the wrong location. They might not be really that strategic. Sometimes they're there because we have to put them there because it's a rule or a law, or it's just good risk management. Oftentimes, they're not really artfully presented or pretty. They're just there. And then sometimes it's not super strategic in how they're placed. Maybe we've just done a big project and we're putting the ones that need to be there. Maybe we haven't thought real closely as to what's in front of them and what's behind them. And so, again, we've been looking at signs all over the place. The other thing that's happened is that we've done a lot of construction projects. And so, we're taking all the signs down and then we're putting signs back up. And so there's some signs that we take down that, why are they even here? Maybe the business is closed or the location has changed, or it's not appropriate to have them in this location anymore. Other times signs get hit by vehicles, or maybe they get vandalized. And so, again, we're talking about signs all the time as to what we have, where should it go, and then do we replace it or do we put it back up? So we started talking about service club signs because some of them had been removed, some of them had been vandalized. We found one in the backyard of a private citizen. They called and said, what are we supposed to do with this sign? And so we started talking about the service club signs, and they are located throughout the community. We had about 6 of them. I think we're down to 5, but what's the purpose of them? We know why they were put in place initially, but what's the current purpose and what's the best use of those signs? So what we did was get all of the service clubs that are most active represented. Everybody was invited, but we had a real good turnout and a really great conversation. It started with those folks that have been installing and taking care of and holding tightly with the signs since early days, and other folks that were new to maybe the organization or to the city, to just what's the purpose of a service club sign. And so we had a very rich conversation. We talked about issues, and in your packet there's a copy of a summarized issue matrix, and we really talked a lot about the sign. What should they look like? What is the purpose of the sign? In the early days, people would drive by and say, oh, there's a club here, here's where they meet, here's what the day and time is, and that was useful information. What we came to the conclusion towards the end is people aren't using those signs for that purpose anymore. If you're coming to a community to do a makeup day or you're visiting, you're going to get online, you're going to check your app, you're going to talk with maybe a person that you know in the club that's in the area to find that out. If you're new to the community, you're going to use those same systems to find out which clubs are in the area, again, when they meet, what their purpose is, et cetera. So we really got to again, we went through those conversations, we talked about a lot of information, and we realized that the sign to tell you when and where it isn't important. The important thing is that we have these service clubs in our community. They're very valuable to our community. They do great work, and that we're very proud of our service clubs. And so what we talked about was that should be the purpose of those signs, that we want to honor those service clubs and let people in the community know that are here, people that are coming through, and also people that are visiting, that we have these service clubs in our community, and then they can take the next action that they want to take. So by the end of the meeting, we did have consensus from everybody, even the people that had been with the clubs for 150 years, that had been polishing that sign once a week diligently, that everybody appreciated that a coexisting sign of some sort would be helpful and would be okay. So then we took a look at a lot of different kinds of signs. And as you can see, There's as many different kinds of signs as there are service clubs. Some are done really, really well. Some are done not so well. Some were done well at one point, but they've aged out, similar to some of our original signs. Sometimes you can see they just peeled a sign off when maybe the service club changed or left. So we saw lots and lots of different signs, electric signs, metal signs, landscape signs, landscaping that hadn't been taken care of for a while. And then we did show kind of the before and after, similar to what I showed you at the beginning, our old welcome signs and our current first impression. This is just the old sign from University Place, and then to show you a more modern sign that it can really make a big impact as well. So then we talked about, well, where would we put a sign if we were going to do one or more, but where would you put your first one? So we looked at potential sites. So I want to go through kind of the 6 sites that we looked at. And what we wanted to do, first of all, is look at where the signs were originally placed. All of the service club signs were basically placed along Gravelly Lake via Nyanza or along Bridgeport, right down through the center of town on those main corridors, because again, visibility was important. So the first location we looked at was the North Bridgeport Gateway. And although we do have a policy regarding not putting information, logos, directional signage at our gateways, the North Gateway, which this is the one that's down by the Walmart, there's this natural divider with that little sidewalk to where the gateway is. There's a really long right-of-way, and that's kind of at the entrance to the community. That's really a location that a sign could be placed, and it wouldn't distract from our gateway. The next location we looked at was, one of the suggestions was, what about the Motor Avenue Colonial Center project? And so we took a look at that area down by the QFC, the store, and all of the Colonial Center area. And so the suggestion was brought up during the design and development of that, which you'll be seeing here next week. And it just didn't come out that the service club sign was going to work in that area based on the designs that we're doing. So, but that suggestion had been made. The third location we talked about was up at the town center. This is along Bridgeport. It's got great visibility. There's many roads that come and go. And although this kind of Center Boulevard sign is there, it really does have pretty good visibility. And it's probably you can't see it on yours because it's there, but this area that's right over here, it's on the left side, I guess you would say, of the gateway sign, there's a good spot there that would fit really nicely under this sign, which is the lawyer office there. There's a good spot there, and it's got good visibility. When we met with the town center folks, and they are open to having it, and also this is the only one that's private property. So that makes it a little more challenging, but it doesn't mean it's undoable because the town center is a good partner for us. We met with town center management. They are open to having a sign in that location. Again, they would want to know what it would look like and how it would impact. They wouldn't want it to take away from their sign. It's a very well-maintained spot. You can tell that it's well-maintained. He also noted a place across the street, which you can see is not the greatest maintained spot. It's also private property. It's in front of the Long Beach Cafe. But he also said it's kind of framed, and it would be a nice spot that could be improved. Doesn't have the same visibility because it's that road by IHOP, that little shorty road. I'm not sure which one it is, but it comes straight on there. But again, there's so many cars that are waiting there for periods of time for the lights and stuff. It would have a good spot where you could see. So there's kind of 2 locations in that area to consider. The 4th spot we looked at was at Gravelly Lake and 112th. This was that area, a car came through and there were some concerns from these folks about some of the safety there. But because we knew there were improvements happening in this area, that could also be a sign or a place where a sign could be located. And again, maybe incorporated with some of the improvements that were going to happen there. 5th location was at Washington Boulevard, and this was, I can't remember if this was before or after the Lotus Blossom went in, but that's the spot we're talking about. But we do know there's going to be massive work in that area, and of course, the picture I have doesn't have that there, but there's going to be a lot of work in that area, and it's going to be a traffic circle. Might not be appropriate for a service club sign, but that was another location. And then the last spot, which is a little bit off the beaten path, but there was a suggestion that maybe it could be put in an area where a gateway was proposed or a gateway could be considered. This is actually a spot that's not on our gateway map, but it is a gateway in the community, and it's out towards 96th and where Front Street is, and you can see it's not a real pretty area right now. And this area, this hillside area, this is where you turn and go up Front Street to the shop and to some other businesses. And so this is an area that could be kind of cut back and cut down and really prettied up. And again, it's a gateway that's not on our gateway plan at this point. And again, surprise, here it is. So drum roll, ta-da, what did the park board decide? The park board decided that they really liked the town center spot. They thought that it was heavily, very visible, heavily trafficked. You'd get a good bang for your buck and a good impact. And then their second, if that didn't work, because again, the private property issue, the other location would be that North Bridgeport Gateway location that's down by the Walmart, which is an entry from the University Place side of the community. So that was their recommendation. And so what we'd really like to get from you is to just some feedback on your thoughts on the spots, on the locations, or questions regarding the process or any of the conversations that we had. I'd love to have some design options to show you tonight. We have sign company working on those for us. We don't really have anything. It will be a simple type sign. We're not looking at a big monument like the gateways that we have because of the locations. We're looking at something that would be a bit simple in the structure of the sign so that the service club logos would be the outstanding element of that. Maybe framed with something that said, you know, thank you for your service, or our service clubs are special, or something like that. And we'll be sharing those with the park board and bringing them back to you at a later date. But we'd love to get some feedback from you. Once we have something that we've kind of made some decisions on, we'll bring that stakeholder group back, or whoever the current representatives of that group are, just to let them know what the follow-up is on that. And then we don't currently have resources to build it, but we would be taking a look at maybe our partners who would be emphasized on that and maybe see if they'd help contribute to that as well. So that's where we're at with our project, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Did the committee discuss eligibility for placement on the sign?
Yeah, we did have quite a conversation about that because they did want to get a definition of a service club. They really wanted it to be a service club and not necessarily a fraternal organization or something that was restrictive in membership. They wanted to look at service clubs or groups that were doing kind of nonprofit group that was providing service to the community. So, they didn't define that specifically, but they did.
Yeah, what does that mean? I mean,
it would be
the Elks Club is primarily social, but it does have a charity element. The membership in the VFW is very restrictive, but it is definitely a service club in more ways than one. So, where do those fall?
They didn't get real specific about that, and I guess council could help make those decisions as to what you'd like to see posted on there. The definitions that they came up with or that we brought back to them was service club means an international, non-political, non-sectarian, not-for-profit organization with the primary goal of providing services that directly benefit the community. A service club is defined as a not-for-profit corporation or group whose philanthropic principles are to address various community service needs in the city. And then the philanthropic piece was dispensing or receiving aid from funds set aside for humanitarian purposes. So we could define that a little more closely, or if council wanted to provide some direction on that, we'd be happy to bring that back.
Questions, comments?
But they did talk about that a little bit as to, you know, did you want to get to the point where it was one of these signs like we showed at the very beginning? I'm just going to rip those back. Some of these signs were quite busy, and then you do sort of lose your impact when you get that many signs like the one that says Paradise. Although, and also if you looked at the sign that's towards the middle lower is not putting all of that extra information on there, really just focusing on the logo. So you could say, because you're not going to be there for 25 minutes, you're going to be there for long enough to say, oh, there's a Lions, oh, there's a Rotary, oh, there's a XYZ, depending on the group that would be on there. So, because they did talk about, you know, Partners for Parks isn't a service club, so to speak, like an international service club. It's a local organization, but every dollar they raise goes to support the community. So would that be allowed on there? So there'd have to be probably a little more clarity, because you could get requests from every nonprofit in the community to be on there.
Mr. Whalen.
With regard to the one private site option, was there discussion how that might come about? By way of what, a permanent easement, maybe a license? Would we buy a 12 by 12 strip of grass?
No,
zone in R2?
Well, when we spoke with the town center, they were open to allowing it to be there. There was no, they didn't talk about a cost. They didn't talk about parceling it out. They just talked about allowing it to be there as a good partner. And then again, the design would sort of merit where you're going to do additional landscaping in front, or have it really be set there, and then, because they do the landscaping in front of their sign, how would that combine or take away? So, but there wasn't any cost about needing to parcel it out or purchase anything at this point. They were open to that.
To me, that, you know, if we can use that spot, it's one of the better, more visible central locations. The one on the north side by Walmart's not bad because it's ours, but it's, you know, it's a little bit like coming in the back door as opposed to the front door.
Anyone else? Ms. Moss?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just thinking, the one sample that you showed, Mary, that had the logos across the top of the, can you go back?
There's this one.
That one. That looks pretty nice. Would that fit over our Welcome to Lakewood signs?
Good boy.
You mean at the current gateways? We hadn't really considered that. When we developed the gateway program, one of the sort of criteria or policies, it's council policy, but one of the, we didn't really want to put logos on that. We wanted people to hit the gateway and just know it was Lakewood. We don't have City of Lakewood on there. We don't have fire station straightforward. It's really just a gateway without any advertising or logos. So we hadn't considered that to enhance the current gateways that we have. And I can put the up here real quick so you could kind of take a look at, that's what the current ones are. So we hadn't considered that. We did talk about taking the structure of this was kind of built after the JBLM Logistics Center design, and so the idea was maybe even looking at that in a simplified manner as the framework for the service club sign. So that's that was criteria that we gave the sign company to consider.
You know, when I was traveling back in the summer, even on the main fairways, they had those signs there, and they catch your attention, and you look for them. But it's more or less for people that are not within the city that are looking for these places, so the logos would be perfect.
Right.
Thank you.
Mr. Whalen, just to follow a comment. You know, one thing that's interesting on that last photograph you brought up for Ms. Moss, the one where it's got the Federal Way, go back to the Federal Way sign on the lower right. Yeah, you know, the one thing we have not thought about is an electronic sign. And I know I was up in Federal Way dealing with the City Hall up there with a client of mine who's got the property just on the other side. And the one thing that's interesting is that came about because of a need to not just have good directional signage, but to also allow really good updated information about city events for the community. And so you could see logos kind of rolling across a good electronic reader board sign that would be easy to put on, easy to take off. You wouldn't have a plethora of littered signs and logos all over the place. It would be one cool electronic sign that would provide really good stuff for the city and logos for these service clubs. It would be interesting to see if we could ever do something like that in the town center where you got a reader board sign. So.
I think it would be a challenge at that particular location because they have an electronic sign. It would be kind of a war of the signs. Yeah. However, we could take a look at that as an option, and technology is much better now than you've seen some of these electronic signs around town that aren't great. But we could consider that or have them look at that. But again, it might be a challenge at that particular site because of the conflict. But if you were interested maybe in the North Lakewood side or
some other good areas,
some other location.
I don't know, it's my thought, but a good reader board to get a lot of community events, more play.
Anything further? Mr. Princeton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Ms. Dodsworth, I'd say that tightening up the eligibility definition to have your recognition of your organization beyond a centralized city sign is really important. Given the definition that you read, I would probably come up with 15 or 16. Okay, you know that makes for a crowded sign, but there are that many organizations that are not strictly local, but that are international or national of some sort, that have a presence and do activities in Lakewood. So there's, and you really need to kind of have an idea of the number before you can move to design. That you can't design it and then throw it open to say who wants to have their thing put here, because we definitely don't want to do it first come, first serve or something like that. So I know it's a work in progress, but I think that narrowing down the which organizations are we talking about, it's certainly larger than the stakeholder group, but it maybe isn't as broad as the definition that was proposed.
Anything else? Well, thank you.
Thanks.
More to come. Back to Mr. Caulfield.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. Tiffany Spear, Planning Manager for Special Projects, here to speak to you under the City Manager's report regarding the Memorandum of Agreement regarding annexation of what was then called Fort Lewis and McCord Air Force Base, the urban areas they're on. What you have, starting on page 192 of your packet, is a memo from me through the City Manager, and then the actual report that's referred to within the memo is there from 2017. The MOA is there for your reference. And as to what next steps are, of course, that's certainly up to you. I'm sorry, the last thing that's also included is the resolution in 1998 that directed the city to proceed with the MOA that was then recorded in 1999. So coming back to page 192 and the memo itself, there was a memorandum of agreement signed between Pierce County and the city of Lakewood regarding potentially annexing urban lands on those two then bases, now JBLM. There are several things that are of note about the memorandum itself. First of all, within section 4 of that amendment, it says the effective date is on the same date the annexation occurs. So that actually hasn't happened yet. So while it's signed and recorded, the effective date isn't really turned on yet because the annexation hasn't occurred. And then once the annexation were to occur under section 6, it would be a 50-year term. Section 12 says the memorandum can be amended by written consent by the county and the city. And then under sections 2 and 3, what was agreed to at the time was that there would be a base rate of $750,000 a year paid to the county for the revenue that would be lost by the annexation occurring, and then that would then be adjusted by the CPI and then population changes as well over time. And then there was another section referring to the fact that if on-base housing were to privatize and become subject to state or local taxing, that would also affect the amount the city would pay on an annual basis to the county. Related to the document as a whole, obviously it's still referring to the two bases, which are now one as of 2010. There's a couple of other things that are out of date or obsolete. There's a reference to this becomes effective, or this can become effective if the areas that would be annexed were to be identified as potential annexation areas for the city. That has happened, and in your packet as well, you'll see maps that identify potential annexation areas for Lakewood, including the urban areas on JBLM as well as Camp Murray. And then there's also the conversation in section 9 about whether or not Lakewood were to become a CDBG, direct entitlement city. That happened, but not as a standalone. It is part of a consortium with Pierce County and Tacoma. And so while the section on one hand has been satisfied, meaning the city has become a direct entitlement city, it's part of this other group. And so how that might affect the agreement, how that might affect payments going to the county, would be needing further exploration, given that they're part of a consortium with the county and the city of Tacoma.
So what, clarification there, is it only home then that's with Tacoma?
Say that again, I'm sorry?
What's the consortium with Pierce County with respect to CDBG?
There is no consortium with Pierce County. There is a consortium with the city of Tacoma and the city of Lakewood. At the time, Pierce County was afraid that the city of Lakewood could establish its own consortium, its own entitlement city, and potentially take away funds from Pierce County. So those things just didn't happen.
So
this is all moot.
So it's not obsolete, it was just inaccurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So here you'll see a map out of a 2007 study that the city commissioned by Burke and Associates, and that again is included in your packet starting at page 219, the entire report. But this just shows you the areas that were under discussion in that report for a couple of reasons. There was a financial analysis done for what revenues would be gained or lost and the net result to the county as well as the city of Lakewood should the annexations happen. But then the rest of the report is focused on potentially using those revenues for the city toward dealing with the North McCord clear zone. So while the North McCord cleared zone is now being handled at least in part by other funds, the analysis regarding what would happen for the county as well as the city upon annexation of these lands is still relevant, and the types of revenues and expenditures that are discussed therein, I think, are still relevant. Here you see the map that shows, according to Pierce County's comprehensive plan.
Hold on, Ms.
I'm sorry.
Center.
Yes.
These maps are always puzzling to me because the actual boundary of the city includes an area of McCord Field that is already within the city limits and that are zoned by us as military lands. And this map and many others tend to not draw the city boundary to actually include that area of the housing area that is on McCord Field that is technically, I won't say it's technically already annexed, but it's annexed-like because it's within the incorporated boundaries of the city from when we first incorporated. But I'm not sure exactly how much of this there is and what's the significance of that.
I'm not sure it's significant, but we have 3 areas. There's some lands within the clear zone area that are inside the city of Lakewood that are technically a part of McCord Field. Then there's lands located in Woodbrook that the federal government acquired and then built housing, and it's roughly the little northeast corner of Woodbrook. And then the other piece is there's parts of the I-5 corridor that are inside the city of Lakewood that are technically the real property is owned by JBLM. So we already have a series of properties within the city of Lakewood zoned that are federal.
So particularly with the area adjacent to Woodbrook, what that was area that at some point in time the Department of the Air Force, the Department of Defense, purchased additional land to expand their housing areas. They did that, but then they put it inside the fence. But because it became jurisdictionally eligible to be a part of the city when the city, I mean, the people in those particular units get to vote for us and be able to do that. I guess if we began to discuss this, I guess it always strikes me as never quite have the actual accurate map because we don't show anything inside the fence as already a part of the city, which would probably be a surprise to a lot of the leaders out at JBLM, who just look at all the maps that they have and we provide them.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Buell, but with respect to Woodbrook, the line was set at incorporation, and it is the straight line on the north boundary, but the fence doesn't follow that straight line.
What happened, yes, what happened was the city of Lakewood incorporated first, and then the federal government came in and acquired the private property and then put the fence up.
And there's a jurisdictional agreement between Lakewood and the Department of Defense or Air Force or Army with respect to civil jurisdiction over there, police protection, for example.
The other issue that we're finding out too is we have all kinds of sewer lines now running through Woodbrook that we did not know about, servicing McCord Field. And so we have other issues that come up from time to time, unique things that we never anticipated that we're trying to currently resolve.
Do they have an easement?
We don't know yet. We're looking into it right now. There's a 15-inch sewer line that runs through a portion of where the school district would like to sell their property and build an industrial park, and we're trying to resolve that at the moment. That came to light literally last week.
So this map is showing you, per the county's comprehensive plan, the fact that those areas that are pointed to by red arrows are urban lands on the both sides of I-5, and they do include Camp Murray, although that's not what's being discussed in this 1998 Memorandum of Agreement. But this is showing you that you have the areas identified that are under discussion for potential annexation by Lakewood. If this were to go forward and if all of those lands were to be annexed, you would be roughly doubling the size of the city of Lakewood. It would go from about 19 square miles to almost 38 square miles. So again, referring back to that study commissioned by the city in 2007, there's a list there of all of the different types of fees that were analyzed within it: property, utility tax and franchise fees, sales taxes, other taxes, state shared revenue, permit fees, business licenses, etc. And so this is just one piece of the information provided in the report, but the net loss, if you will, or impact is the way it's phrased, to the county in 2007 dollars on an annual basis was estimated at about $2.1 million. When I was preparing this information for the city manager, I reached out to budget and finance staff at the county, and their conclusion was that given the fact that the population has actually gone down since 2005 when that information was put together, and just the way recessions and other things have gone on since 2007, the estimate is still about a $2 million loss of revenue to the county should the annexations occur. The question was put to the county as to how it spends the funds it currently receives from urban military lands, but that answer has not yet been provided to us. If you were to pursue this as a city, there is a state statute specifically regarding annexation of federal areas. It's RCW 35A14-310, and I've just provided it there in its entirety, but the underlined areas I think are of most interest. Basically, the city would be adopting an ordinance providing for the annexation, and that would either acknowledge agreement of the annexation by the U.S. or accepting a gift, a grant, or lease from the government of the U.S. One note that's there that says this right of annexation shall not apply to any territory more than 4 miles from the corporate limits. I'm not 100% sure if that applies or not in this situation. I didn't think it did, but I wasn't 100% sure. But then on the second paragraph of the statute, you'll see that within 25 days of the receipt of the notice, the county might adopt a resolution opposing the annexation, and if that occurs, the annexation can't go forward under this statute. So as far as next steps, assuming the county or city wanted to continue to discuss this, there would be the need to update or amend the Memorandum of Agreement, which is provided for within its own language. And then also looking to 35A language, you would want to be dealing ahead of time with the county as well as the base, just to make sure that there wouldn't be the potential for that opposition coming from them when it was time for the council to take action. And that's it for me.
interest in the county? Wayland. Well, I was just wondering, from your perspective, or Mr. Boki's ear to the ground, is there any remote interest from the county in doing this after 12 years with the prior MOA?
I don't think it's a subject of discussion. I mean, it hasn't been. So the county doesn't annex anything, obviously.
Right.
Nobody's been asking. I haven't heard anybody bring it up. I would like to know what did Lakewood get from the original agreement?
Having reviewed the agreement, Mr. Mayor, the ability to annex. But given the amount of money that was offered to pay right back to the county, I don't know long-term what you're getting other than a geographical increase.
You mean the ability to annex?
Well, I mean, the county saying, yes, let's go forward.
What it was the county was agreeing not to object.
Basically,
what was
from what I understand.
What was
Maybe Mr.
the,
Viewer might
what
be
was
able to
the
provide
barrier that was supposedly being removed?
I'm having to go back a long time to think this through, so please excuse me, but if you take a look at the MOA, there really was no financial benefit to the city of Lakewood. I mean, anything that the city of Lakewood were to gain from annexation, we'd have to basically refund or make sure that the county was given whole. And the agreement was in place for a period of 50 years. That's a long, long time. I think in the end, what it was about was the city of Lakewood could politically establish itself as a city of not of 60,000, but closer to 84 to 90,000 in population. There was some benefit to that in the long term, as well as trying to create a better relationship between JBL.
I mean, from the county, what did the county do or not do because of this agreement?
The county didn't do anything.
So they gave nothing for the agreement?
That's correct.
They didn't, was there a pending request to change the growth, the urban growth boundary? Was there an agreement not to object to a request to incorporate, which wouldn't be binding on future councils?
Literally, the urban growth area boundary that you see on these maps was negotiated between myself and an attorney representing Pierce County the day of the hearing on the county's review of the proposal. That happened first, then after that came the MOA. And then the MOA, as I recall, the then city manager was not really happy with it, but it was the best that he could get from the county at that time. Looks like I'm not giving you a good answer.
Well, yeah, I don't know that you're the cause of there not being a good answer. Maybe there isn't one. It's just, I see this kind of agreement on the other way now from the county all the time, where there's an agreement and it's all one way, and I just don't see what, I can see Lakewood's, where you mentioned, well, we can say we're 84,000 and maybe there's going to be some advantage to that in the future, et cetera. But I can't see what the county is agreeing to do or giving up.
So the one thing I will say is once the agreement was signed, then the Army Corps of Engineers prepared their report, which was a recommendation not to proceed with annexation, and at that point the whole thing just died.
So it appears there was an implied agreement by the county not to object to annexation.
Yes.
But not a written agreement by the county not to object to annexation.
I'd have to go back and take a look at the MOA.
But that's what we're looking at here.
On page 215 of your packet, under section 8, it shows the county executive support for UGA amended and annexation proposal. So that is in the writing of the MOA itself.
215.
On page 215 toward the bottom, section 8.
Yes, they'll cooperate. Great.
So the only consideration is the promise by a county executive who has long been out of office.
Correct.
recommend to a council that isn't there anymore. Okay.
Doug Sutherland. Okay, we can amend it. It says section 12.
I know where Doug Sutherland lives. He's down in Arizona now. Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, certainly from the city of Lakewood's point of view, our point of view, the most significant advantage to Lakewood is annexation is very much be in furtherance of our vision for our community, particularly the point of where we were going to be heavily engaged and supportive of service members and their families at JBLM. That I know we would do much more for them, and would be far better to do that than the county is doing, and that if we were to do an annexation, we could do more. But I'd also think that the reality, given that the state statute essentially gives us no leverage against the county, you know, it only gives them leverage against us, and it's all related to fiscal impacts, not societal impacts or whatever it is. So I think for us to pursue the annexation of the federal properties, this does not necessarily mean Camp Murray, but certainly to do them in a significant way is probably dead on arrival at the county council. And that as far as annexation is concerned, we can look at Camp Murray, and that we perhaps can look at the federal property that where the Veterans Hospital is situated, because I don't think that has that significant of a fiscal impact on the county as the cantonment area where there is population and varieties of tax revenues available. But I just not sure that this is something that there's a lot of effort that we could put forth with a realistic expectation of a positive result in the near term. I think we focus on the clear zone, and then in Camp Murray and any other smaller annexations is a more practical course of action for us.
I guess I don't disagree with Mr. Branstetter. Assume this agreement isn't there, and it may not be there because it may not be valid and enforceable. You have a situation where the policy of the Department of Defense is to not consent to an annexation where there is local municipal opposition. And so unless the county council wants it to happen, or at least takes a neutral position, the Department of Defense will not let it happen. So that's a difficult path. There's also, I did get a call from the Assistant Director of Finance to give me a heads up, from the county to give me a heads up on Ms. Spears' request and his response. I didn't discuss this with him in detail, but after he told me what his equation was, I thought a bit, and he's correct as far as it relates to general fund money. but there's an element of non-general fund money, which is rather significant and new, and that's the lodging tax that's generated by the 700 plus units out there. So in addition to what was there then, which is 2 million to 2 million, there's probably another 2 million of lodging tax money that didn't exist in 2007 that the county would be asked to give up. And so that would make it even more difficult. Mr. Caulfield.
If I could just interject. Certainly this, I agree with Councilmember Branstetter, would be a pretty significant lift. I'd just like to say I think from a policy standpoint, from the city's perspective, if that area was annexed into the city of Lakewood, I think one of the things that Lakewood prides itself on is what we do to help the base. And if we got both that revenue stream, and I'm going to put the lodging tax dollars aside here because I do think that that's something that we could handle separately. But if JBLM was, and the cantonment area was annexed to the city of Lakewood, I think we could be even a better neighbor with JBLM, the service members and their families. Because what you would have the ability to do would be able to take that revenue stream and invest that back into JBLM. For example, investing a portion of the monies into helping the encroachment area, the North Clear Zone. Taking another portion of the money and investing it perhaps similar to your 1% of your general fund, either directly into organizations and entities that work on base, whether that's child care or social services or mental health care, PTSD, or anything along those lines. Or even providing funding directly to Garrison Command for some of their municipal services. And then perhaps even a third component would be to help our own general fund with some of the costs that we have in regards to particularly public safety and transportation. You know, I would suggest that at the very least, why not have at least a conversation, you know, with the county about this and, you know, see if there's something that can be done here. I will say this from GMA's perspective, you know, the money that, you know, the county is supposed to be encouraging annexations. And, you know, and I know I've had this conversation in all cities that I've worked in, and that's why you saw it in the presentation. Okay, you're losing X amount of revenue, but you should also be saving X amount of costs because you're no longer providing, you know, those services. So there's a bit of a yin and a yang there. But I would suggest to this body that this is something that's, if not worth pursuing, at least having some conversations with the county over that. And again, I think it all comes back to, I think, what we can do for JBLM long-term.
Yeah, don't disagree, but it's a heavy lift because there's not the savings on services. Plus there's the additional, you contract around it, but the additional cost to the base of utility tax, so, which the county doesn't have. And the county would love to have Tacoma annexed south, taking in the urban areas. But, Tacoma isn't about to do that. Any other questions?
My phone doesn't go anywhere.
I mean, I can talk to the county council chair. I see him all the time. So he's probably the one that would be most receptive. And when he says, if he says he doesn't think there's a snowball's chance, there isn't a snowball's chance. So we'll make that inquiry and expect global warming. Anything further, Mr. Caulfield?
I know it's getting late, Mayor, but just a couple updates. On the economic development front, we have initiated a process to take a look at the condition of what we refer to as the old QFC building that's owned by Westwood Financial. And so our team went out and met with some of their representatives about 2 weeks ago or so. And long story short, the building is in really bad shape, in need of some structural improvements and a new roof and things along those lines. And it could be that they may have to tear the building down and just scrape the property.
Be great.
But I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Also, speaking of the Colonial Plaza in general, under the umbrella of No Surprises, we're going to be bringing back to you design options, conceptual plans for the Colonial Plaza. So our team has really outdone themselves, and so the preferred option is a bit pricey, to the tune of $400,000 or $500,000 above, the budget. But it's very well done, and so we will bring that forward to you
What is it now?
next Monday evening.
Oh, above the budget.
Above, yeah. But it's very, very well done. I will tell you that, and I think you'll be pleased with the proposal.
Is there a water feature?
Yeah, is there a water feature, John?
No water feature.
Go back to the drawing board.
Is there a splash park?
Okay.
Last week on Wednesday, the county exec held a PSRC regional engagement meeting with representatives of Pierce County cities and towns, as well as representatives from Snohomish and Kitsap County. And long story short, the outcome of that is Pierce County is going to take the lead, working with not just cities within our region, but also Kitsap and Snohomish County, and kind of collating to essentially speak with one voice. And then the county executive, as the vice president of PSRC, making sure that the Puget Sound Regional Council and their staff are actively engaged and working much closer with Pierce County on issues that they are moving forward in. Other Pierce County partnerships that the city's working on is last week the county hosted a meeting with not just our city but Puyallup on perhaps partnering with them on their PALS system. I can tell you from our perspective, it's something that we are very excited about. So if we can come to an agreement across the board in terms of data conversion and governance and cost and things along those lines, I think our recommendation will be to jump in with both feet. It's a tried and proven system, and if the county can make it work, I think it's something that we would like to partner with them on. Likewise, we're also continuing to have discussions with them on them providing contracted services to us in support of traffic signal maintenance. They have sent over proposals, so we're in the process of evaluating that. Also helping out with some sign issues. And then we have also asked them to provide us a proposal on vectoring and street sweeping. Currently, we contract with the private sector on that, but would like to see what they could do for us. Also along the county line, the county has been gracious to provide us some conservation futures monies to expand Springbrook Park. I think you're aware of the 3 properties along 47th. One of the property owners is having some problems moving their tenants out, having them find adequate housing. So the closing of those properties might extend into January. Also, the middle property, the county's having some challenges with just having some conversations and things like that. So it could be the early part of 2019 before that all comes together. Last week, the International City County Management Association approached the city as host community to JBLM, asking us if we would be willing to host a fellow, basically an incoming installation commander at a military base. And so long story short, of course, I agreed that we'd do whatever we could do to help. Basically, the city's involvement would be just to kind of show her or him kind of the ropes of how a city works, given how Garrison Command works in a very similar format.
And how long a period is that?
I think the fellowship is several months long, but our commitment would be about a week, about 5 days or so.
Oh.
Be kind of shadowing myself and some of our executive team. And just in terms of a calendar, tomorrow morning, the city, working with a number of agencies, is going to be hosting an event right here in the council chambers called the Recruiting Resources During Times of Low Unemployment. So a nice forum. So if you have a chance, if you'd like to stop on by and sit in, it'll be from 8 to 10. On Wednesday morning over at the Clover Park Technical College Rotunda, same place as last year at 7:30, we'll be having our 4th quarter employee recognition event. And then, of course, on Saturday we have the Christmas tree lighting and holiday festival. Just a friendly reminder for those of you who are participating in the parade to meet at Park Lodge Elementary at 3:30, because the parade is going to kick off at 4, and then tree lighting at 4:30. So, yes.
Fun.
So with that, it's my report.
If it is, you get the convertible.
The employee recognition is what time?
7:30 on Wednesday morning, Mayor.
That's an AM, 7:30.
7:30 a.m. Yes, I'm sorry, yes, 7:30 a.m.
Any questions for the city manager? Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the subject of park properties becoming part of the city, what's the status of, what is anything going to happen before the end of the year on the ownership of Fort Steilacoom Park?
So we are cautiously optimistic that that will get done by June 30th of 2019. We're in the process right now of drafting a letter to the DSHS Secretary expressing our concerns regarding their position on certain items on the particularly the water system out there that they would like to either keep or have some issues over. So we're trying to work through that right now.
So is that a change in the date that was in the budget proviso?
Nope, absolutely not, Councilmember.
Budget proviso was still for June of
30th, 2019. That's correct. Okay. We are working on the city side, and I would probably say the Department of Enterprise Services, which is also involved in this, are working on a much, as well as Pierce College, we're all working on a much faster timeline than perhaps DSHS is.
Thank you.
Maybe the city attorney can start working on the writ of mandamus so they can sign the deed. Any other questions for the city manager? Council comments, Ms. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to say that I really appreciated the ceremony we had for the police this afternoon. It was very interesting, and it's good to get some of the good stories out and to recognize our citizens, so I really appreciated that. And I also enjoyed the 2-2 Striker Brigade reception that we had last week. That was wonderful, well attended, got to meet some of the new people coming in, so that's always good. And on Thursday, I participated in the graduation for the Airman Leadership School at JBLM on McCord Field. As always, it was a lot of fun, well attended. But I was most impressed with some of the projects that the students did during their studies. They worked and raised over $10,000 in food that they gave to the homeless and some of the food banks. So I was really impressed with that. So they did a good job. So, while doing their studies. So, and thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Bolke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I enjoyed last Wednesday night with the 2-2 Striker Brigade. It was very nice. I was in awe tonight of what people do in very stressful circumstances. You got people jumping in the water, people pulling other people out of cars, people doing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation or resuscitating people. I'm just in awe of them, and it's, you know, it's really our honor to be able to do that. I'm excited to see all the work on lights, especially. I mean, I don't go to the other parts of town all that often. I know we're working in other neighborhoods, but especially on 87th Avenue, just to the north of Starbucks on the side where a lot of people walk. We have nice sidewalks in there, and there's a lot of apartments, and then around Oakbrook School, and I think it's going to look really nice. I do have one comment, and I don't want to come across as negative, but I do have a concern, and I'll leave this for my other two PCRC members. I did get feedback on Wednesday night's meeting with Executive Dan Meyer that the city of Lakewood used that opportunity to again express its support to just leave the PSRC and PCRC, or the PSRC, which I think we're all on record as being in support of, and if we had that vote tonight, I think we would know how it goes. But it was my understanding that the meeting really wasn't for that the meeting was really to work with the other counties, Kitsap, Snohomish, and then the cities in our county to come up with ways to cooperate better that would bring us a level of success at the PSRC that we just have not had. And so I think we need, I mean, I got two comments on it, and neither one of them were positive. They weren't necessarily negative, but and I think we just need to dial that back. I think we've told everybody. I think everybody understands that the city of Lakewood stands by to when we're ready to go and when these other cities. But from my standpoint, I just don't see any support for that right now. I mean, clearly Tacoma isn't, but I don't even see the smaller cities being in support of it. So I think right now we need to support the executive in his quest to try to make this work, because I think next year he's chair. And I mean, that's my, but I leave that to John and Jason to, if they have any other comments on that or have a difference of opinion on that. But that's all I got.
Mr. Branstetter.
I'm fine, Mayor.
Ms. Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to chime in and say that I really appreciated the ceremony tonight, the awards, and it amazes me as well that people will put their lives on the line. Frankly, I'd just faint, so don't rely on me to do anything. I'm really proud of our Lakewood police officers. I did stop at the food drive on Thursday, and from what I understand, it was quite a success. And a couple of the officers also told me that it was really a healing process for them. And you know, we don't think about it that way, but they said, you know, the people come, they talk to us, and it's just like it happened yesterday, and it really is it helps us heal. And so that's all I have to say. And I am glad you didn't cancel Christmas, even though you canceled the 2 meetings. You know, I know who canceled those meetings. Anyway, thank you.
Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to follow up on Councilmember Moss's comments about the dinner last week. It was a little more than I expected. I sat across the table with Lieutenant Colonel Charles Ford, a former student. And I'll tell you, he said something to me that, you know, I've every so often I hear it and I see it, but I don't believe it. He said to me, "You have no idea the impact you've had." And it was really, I was glad I was there. I thought it was well done. Although there was some Navy guy walking around with an Army shell casing. But I did appreciate that dinner very much. With regard to Mr. Boke's comments, I concur. I'm maybe not as gentle-minded as you are, but I can see that if we were to go out on our own, we could probably hurt ourselves. So for the moment, for the time being, I think we dial it back and we do what we can do within the confines of what we do here in PCRC. But I think we keep that message out there that, I mean, quite frankly, I don't care what Tacoma thinks. You know, they're married at the hip to PSRC. But I think we we watch, we learn, but we're there. We're still there. We still want an accounting, so to speak, of how we and other cities are treated in the county and in the greater intra county area. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Whalen. Kudos to Brianna on the coordination for the Thornwood dinner. They did a great job. It turned out fantastically, and I think it was not only well attended, but well appreciated by all who were in attendance, so thank you for that. The other commendation is on tonight's ceremony as well. I think it's, as Chief Zarro indicated, it's too easy for folks to criticize, but it's not often that we get to celebrate and, I don't want to say eulogize, but at least appreciate the incredible stuff that they do day in and day out, as well as members of the public. That was pretty amazing. So I was at the Arts Commission meeting tonight, and I just want to emphasize what the city manager indicated about the event this weekend. It's not just the Jingle Bell Dash and not just the tree lighting. It's the first time we've kind of put it all together. And those folks have put a lot of work into trying to make this successful. So far there are 184, 185 registrants for the run, which is pretty good size, and there'll be more between now and Saturday. They have 30 vendors. As you may remember, between the run and the parade is kind of a Christkindl market, if you will. There'll be 30 vendors, some of whom will be inside, and most of whom will be outside the City Hall area, and they plan to have kind of the fire pits and hot chocolate and soup and all that sort of stuff. So it really could be the beginning of a very nice event for people. More should be able to attend because it is on Saturday, in my opinion on that. So I'll be there. With regard to the PSRC comment, I think, Mr. Book and I chatted a little bit about it when he got wind that there were some folks who were maybe less than supportive of our position, and I tend to agree that we do need to just dial it back. If the county executive is trying to work from within to create a sense of leadership and instill a better sense of leadership with the South Puget Sound, Pierce County cities and towns, we probably got to do that, because otherwise we're kind of just spitting in the wind. Tacoma is never, never, never going to vote to leave PSRC. And without their vote, it'll never, 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 never happen. So, we can be the outlier all we want, or we can work constructively to make change and be a leader, as we do in so many other areas. I would suggest we do that. That's it.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How did Deputy Mayor Whalen and Councilmember Boakey get a 2003 Ford Cobra for the parade? I'd like an investigation into this.
Because they get to go 5 miles an hour. But it doesn't mean anything at 5 miles an hour.
That's horsepower wasted on these two guys.
That's true.
They get to go 5 miles, maybe 3 miles an hour. Well, on Thursday, I joined the city manager, police chief, and a rather substantial contingent of our police force and others in the renewal and rededication memorial service at the Blue Steel Coffee memorial that had been allowed by the private owners to decay. The Knights of Columbus had rejuvenated the grounds around that. Flags were replaced. It was a nice ceremony. Followed that with a stop at the food drive and hung around there for a little while, and it was going well. Those flashing lights in the street tend to attract people, but I'm anxious to hear how it came out. I did cede possession of the 105 millimeter tank gun round from the anti-tank striker variant that the 2.2 gave us. And I would only note for the benefit of those who made disparaging comments that that's what Navy gunners' mates put in their bandolier arrows. Is there any further business to come before the council? And we're adjourned.
Do you have your executive deal? Or aren't we doing executive session?
Oh, there is.
Yeah.
We're not adjourned.
Hi, Mayor, yeah, we wanted to request an executive session. It can wait. It's not urgent. It's nothing urgent. Just it's just an update. We can do it either next week or, yeah, we can either do it next week or your first meeting in January. Next Monday on the agenda, you have Dave Holt will be here from Western State Hospital, and then third quarter financial report. Mary Dodsworth and Sally Martinez will have an update on special events, and then the Colonial Plaza. So we can do it next week. It's not urgent. It's a rush. It's just something we try and do, 3-4 times a year.
The discussion on the water feature is going to take at least an hour.
Yeah.
It's rain.
We're adjourned. So, there's a long story goes behind this.